Let's talk about a really important U.S. Supreme Court decision for individual rights against police brutality. That is Tennessee versus Garner. This was a 6-3 decision from 1985. Justice Byron White wrote the majority opinion. And basically what happened there was 2 police officers were called by a woman saying that the house next to her was being broken into. She gestured at the adjacent house. They saw Mr. Garner, who was a fairly small man actually. They identified themselves as police. They said, "Police, halt." Mr. Garner tried to run away. They could see his face, they could see his hands, and it was pretty clear that he had no weapon on him, nothing that could harm them. Mr. Garner tried to climb over a fence. He tried to do this, and so the police responded by shooting him in the back of the head. Yeah, so an ambulance was called. Mr. Garner ended up dying, and so Garner's father sued the police department, the Memphis Police Department, I believe it was, in the courts. And at the district court level, they lost. The police won. They said, well, it was reasonable given the circumstances. The police were actually acting under a Tennessee statute, which allows them to use, quote, all means necessary to effect the arrest when a defendant flees. So yeah, very, very enabling statute. Lots of discretion on the part of police. They shot a guy who was unarmed, who was running, and he died. So then it gets to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals actually rules in favor of Garner. They say, well, okay, he was running away. It didn't seem like he had a weapon on him. This was a burglary. It wasn't attempted murder. He wasn't going out to try and harm anyone else. He was running away unarmed. What's the big deal here? Why shoot him in the back of the head? So of course, this makes its way up to the US Supreme Court. And it's a fairly conservative court at this point. President Reagan's been in office, but 6-3, Justice Byron White, a fairly conservative guy, writes the majority opinion and says, no, this is unacceptable. The police may not do this. So he says that deadly force may not be used unless it is necessary to prevent the escape, and the police officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect presents a significant risk of death or serious physical injury to the officer or to others. And that sure as heck was not present here. The guy did not have a weapon. He was running away. Even though he probably shouldn't have run away, even though he probably should have complied when the police said, halt. You know what? You don't deserve to get shot for that. You're not protecting anyone by shooting this guy. And so they say the idea of killing fleeing felons originated in the common law, but you know what? Times have changed. Times have changed since then. You know, we have some modern standards of decency where it's like, okay, maybe you shouldn't shoot a fleeing felon to death. Maybe they don't get the death penalty just for trying to flee, on its own. Maybe there needs to be something more. Maybe they need to have a weapon that they could use to harm someone. Maybe they might harm someone else or the police officer. In that case, yes, deadly force can be used. And as Justice Byron White points out in the majority opinion, we have to subject deadly force, use of deadly force, to the Fourth Amendment's reasonableness standard. And you know what? Lethal force is the most intrusive way to enact a seizure. So we really have to look at, okay, how on earth can this possibly be reasonable? We need some really, really extreme behavior on the part of the fleeing suspect in order for this to be reasonable. Given the circumstances, it's really hard to justify using lethal force. You really need to have a police officer or someone else in danger. So this was a very, very enlightened, well-written opinion. And it's 1985, so it's 40 years old as of me making this video. This is 2025. So think about what it was like prior to that. Police, we think about how screwed up the criminal justice system is these days, but think about how it was prior to 1985 when police could just do this, when the Supreme Court hadn't weighed in on it, And then you had 3 conservative justices in the dissent, Justice O'Connor, Chief Justice Warren Burger, who was a very tough on crime guy, and future Chief Justice William Rehnquist, who was an extremely tough on crime guy, almost always sides with the police. Justice O'Connor writes the dissent, and she says, the majority ignored how serious burglary is. Yes, burglary is very serious. I wish burglary on no one. It's a bad crime. Someone fleeing after a burglary who poses no harm to people, no lethal harm, no harm in terms of, serious injury, they're not going to harm someone, and it's clear that they're not going to, probably shouldn't be shot. Probably shouldn't be shot to death. Yeah. So this kind of illustrates the difference between centrist and liberal justices and the more conservative, tough on crime types who are like, yeah, no, let the police do this, let them do their thing. They're special, they're fighting crime. Burglary is really bad, and maybe they were well within their rights to shoot this guy. Yeah, burglary is a felony. Burglary is a felony. That's a very serious thing. But you don't just shoot someone if it's not clear that they're going to go harm someone. Kind of like the standard for self-defense. You have to fear that you're at risk of substantial bodily harm or death, or that someone else is. And so they kind of apply that to the police too. And it's good that we apply those types of standards to police officers. This is an interesting opinion. You probably read it in a criminal procedure course if you're in law school, maybe a constitutional law course as well, because it has to do with the Fourth Amendment. I hope that this video is helpful to you. I hope that you can take it to the bank and get an A+ in whatever class you're reading it for, however you stumbled upon this video. If you just like to research, do legal research, learn about the law, and learn about Supreme Court cases, that is also freaking cool too. I talk about a lot of politics and law on this channel, so I hope it's something that interests you. If it does, please subscribe, please like and comment. Tell me what you think about this case. Thank you so much for watching. This is the more the merrier, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.